Okay, that's interesting. Did they, by the way, did they print the correction? Did you see it? The correction to the mask ordinance?
I did not see it in last week's paper, but I wasn't looking for it.
No, I think last week's paper was, the headline was mask ordinance passes. And then I told them, and they said they would print the retraction. Jessica.
Actually first work session related to the 2022 village goals. And we're going to call this meeting to order. And Judy, if you'd like to call the roll, please.
Yes, Hausch.
I'm here.
McQueen.
Here.
Curlis.
Here.
And I believe we're still waiting for Stokes and Krieger. Also present from the village are Finance Director Matt Dillon, Public Works Director Johnny Burns, Chief Carlson, and Village Solicitor Brianne Parcels, as well as Village Manager Josue Sampa.
All right, thanks. And I do want to highlight, I know for Lisa Krieger, she will be about 30 minutes late. There was a death on her work team, and she handle that. So I want to begin by just framing something that I think is important when we're thinking about goals. And then I'm going to hand it over, or I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're going to format this meeting. So I wanted to highlight that I think several years ago, I guess prior to me being council president, there was sort of a delineation between council goals and, I guess, administration goals. And one of the things that I think we've talked about like every year since I've been council president is that segmentation does not make sense. And we have to be very aligned as a legislative body and an administrative body. And so I want to like keep that in mind as we're like discussing and framing and whatnot. But I think the bottom line is we call these goals village goals because ultimately we are not going to be able to accomplish anything if we're not working in harmony as a council and just an overall village team. And I mean, that's why I ran for council, because I saw that, sort of disconnect. And I think it's continuing to be relevant. And I will assume that that's going to be the case next year. But with the caveat that I know that, there's some thought that there may be some major change in council, which is why we're still calling these draft goals. But my sense is that a lot of the things that we'll be delving into today are going to be very relevant next year, no matter what. So with that, I wanted to talk a little bit about like how we're going to format this. We're going to focus mostly on input from council. And then with whatever time that's remaining, I'm going to say that I'm going to like give all my time back because I've captured in the draft document what I think is relevant. So hopefully we'll have a lot of time for village team members to speak as well. But we're going to begin with 10-minute maximum input from each council member. And then after that, we're going to start discussing some of the nitty gritty and, see how far we get in the draft document. And we're going to begin with Laura. And so, Judy, I'd like you to keep the 10-minute time for us as we go through like council members. And so Laura, if you want to share your document, you can. And I appreciated all the input, but yeah, so you got 10 minutes to tell us what you're thinking.
Brian, if I could go second because
Okay,
I'm about
that's fine.
2 minutes away from, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, we can have Mary Ann. Okay, so Mary Ann, you're first.
Oh, okay. I'm not gonna, I did submit a document and I'm not gonna talk about everything in the document. I'm pulling out three main things, I think. Housing, economy, sustainability and resilience, and council staff relationship. So I'd like to talk about housing first. If you attended the candidates night for council, affordable housing was something I think that all of the people running for council, the non-incumbent people mentioned. And having been working on housing for over 20 years, I'm aware of the difficulties that it takes to do housing. Housing, economy, sustainability, and resilience are not just problems of Yellow Springs, they're national problems. And of course, climate change and biodiversity loss is a global issue as well. So I've gotten pretty frustrated with the lack of progress we've made on housing, and no blame, because if it were easy, it would be done. For example, there used to be local housing developers. We used to even have local builders and people in the trades. As I think everyone knows, we have very few local builders, few people in the trades, no local developer except for Home Inc. The last local for-profit developer was Andrew Cook, and he left, I think in part because the housing development that he wanted to work on fell through. He just couldn't make it work here. So village government has a pretty limited role in what we can do about housing. We can do zoning that makes it easier, and that is a recommendation that I have, that next year we create a task force that include people like Alex Melamed, who has some great ideas on how we can do more infill development to meet housing needs. I think it's only about 25% of the population nationally that is the traditional two-parent family with children, 25%. And yet, if you look at Yellow Springs housing, most of our housing are single-family homes, many of which are being lived in by one person, maybe two people. So I think that we need to, if the village government is serious about increasing a diverse housing stock, we need to reach out. The Yellow Springs Development Corporation has to be involved. As a village government, we do not have the capacity, we don't have the tools to do the kind of things that need to be done in housing. I think we need to get Antioch involved. They have land. I think we need to have, I said a housing summit. I don't know what it would be, but we need to have the political will. We need to get the capital. We need to get the expertise. We need to get the ideas together if we're actually going to move the needle on housing. Sustainability, climate change. So, I had been very excited about starting the climate action and sustainability pilot project. However, I'm questioning the viability of that at least being run by the village government. It's been seen, I think, as my pet project, and clearly I am passionate about it. I think that as a village government and as a community, we have to be preparing for what's coming down in terms of climate change and what's happening to our natural systems globally. That means both mitigating and shifting those things as much as we can, as well as being able to be resilient and adapt to the changes that are going to be happening. But my sense is that for whatever reason, it's my pet project, whatever, that staff does not support this. And I'm disappointed, but I don't think that it makes sense to try to continue funding this into next year unless something shifts on that. Okay, the third, I am not so versed on economy. I think that we need to really be leaning on the Yellow Springs Development Corporation to support the local economy. And again, we can do zoning, anything we can do to encourage entrepreneurship by zoning home businesses, I think we should do. So now I'll talk about council staff relationship. So council makes the decisions. They get funneled down through the village manager to staff, and staff does the work. And it's sort of a setup for staff to, they do the work and council gets the credit, sort of. I don't think it works. I don't think the situation works to expect that our village manager can take the things from council and take it out to the staff, and from staff and bring it back up to council. I think we have a breakdown. So I don't think, and to the degree that we have staff thinking one thing or wanting one thing or acting one way and council being in a different place, it's dysfunctional. I'm not sure exactly what to do about it. I don't know whether we should be switching our committees, as Laura had suggested, so that we have council members and staff and citizens on committees. Maybe council members need to go to staff meetings. I'm not sure how we change it, but I think there is a disconnect, and I don't think it serves us. So I'm done.
All right, thanks, Marianne. And actually, I appreciate the authenticity of the feedback as well. Yeah, I think that last area once we get through council comments, that might be a good thing for our leadership team to think about how they want to make a few comments. So that'll be like the next piece. And then we'll see how far we get in the document. So Laura, I see you're still on the phone. Should I go to Kevin or?
Maybe go to Kevin. I'll be there in a minute.
Okay, cool. All right. All right, so Kevin, you're up. So up to 10 minutes, and Judy is timing for your thoughts about 2022 goals.
Okay, thank you. I have a few notes here. Let me just try to pull that up. It's not very formal, so I won't share it. First of all, from 1 year to the next, I don't believe, and I think Brian, this has been part of your approach, considering the draft 2022 goals. And the point I'm making is, we don't need to go wholesale completely different with a completely different set of goals from 1 year to the next. Certainly some of the things that we've identified as critical issues in 1 year, if it takes us more than a year to resolve all those issues. And a lot of these are going to be, multi-year goals, almost getting over into a vision or value, because we're like constantly doing it. But support, Mary Ann certainly touched on a lot of things that I've been concerned about, certainly from a housing perspective. I just think we need to decide how serious we are, about housing in general. We could focus on the phrase affordable housing, but I think if we just start with housing of any and every ilk, we start moving down that road. So we've got the overdevelopment that's going to check off a lot of boxes in terms of market rate housing. One thing that I guess I want to dive into at some point would be, from an affordable housing perspective, how much of that gift that is talking about giving us, how much, or is all of that going to be something that can be used sort of as a pocket neighborhood development? So with respect to housing, I do think the focus needs to be on affordable housing to some degree, but again, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but focusing on housing of any sorts, but with a particular focus on, like I said, the affordable stuff. I think it would be nice if we also decided we wanted to have, an apartment complex built on some land that we have access to. Don't know if that parcel in the overdevelopment is right for that, but certainly if we can get over all the other concerns that we have with Glass Farm, I would suspect that there's some part of that land that we could use. Now, with respect to building, something being built, Mary Ann also touched on the fact that we just don't have small local developers. So whether they're local or not, I think we ought to have a relationship with builders. We can decide what we want to have done, but we need to be in a relationship with someone to actually, do the digging and hammering and nailing and whatnot. To a large degree, we have YS Home Inc. as we have a relationship with Home Inc. 3 or so years ago, we started using the term partnership, and the rationale for that was to get out of that cycle that we, I think, found ourselves in a couple of times, where we're halfway through, our budget year, and then we find out a need that Yellow Springs Home Inc. has. And that's not necessarily their fault. A lot of times it's just the funding sources and the cycle that's on. There have been efforts made by Home Inc. to try to either integrate themselves into our planning processes or vice versa, us inserting ourselves into theirs. I don't know what the right thing to do is there, but other than Overer and Home Inc., there's no one who's offered to build anything of any sort. So I wonder if we, should be looking for folks that want to partner with us. Miller Valentine, I think, comes to mind. If I'm not mistaken, they have an affordable housing division. So like I said, we talk so much about affordable housing. I think taking some step forward would be, a very serious, a sign that we're serious, about housing. Brian, in your draft, I've got grandkids here. Just a second. You mentioned replicating the pocket neighborhood development model, whether that's the right thing for that parcel in overdevelopment or not. But if we're serious about it, again, we got to make a commitment. Infrastructure. When I say infrastructure, I don't have to go into details, but I'm definitely concerned about infrastructure, repairing and maintaining, improving, the hard infrastructure, water, electric, sewer, storm, but also, like at the national level, let's throw in municipal broadband as part of that infrastructure that we need to commit to doing. Well, I know we've done that somewhere, but I'd like to not separate municipal broadband from the other infrastructure because we do anticipate offering it, as a utility, like we do with most of those other things. And so I really just want to show our commitment in that regard. And then also the people infrastructure. That's another thing that's happening, at the national level. At least like Joe Biden wants to consider people part of our infrastructure. And so, we haven't done a great deal of work in the social services area. In one of our recent meetings, I think we did start to touch on, the police budget and whether we should be spending more time policing or more on the social side of things. So I kind of think we should focus on the social side. There was a statistic given at the candidates forum last week. I don't know if they made it up or what, but it was 98%, of police calls are village versus villager interactions. And so I wonder, as the police get called to those things and then they walk away, is there any follow-up from a social services perspective? Mediation or anything else to help avoid those things from happening again. And that concern does sort of, that concern that I have comes from a couple of different areas. One, I even suggested a few weeks ago that instead of spending as much money as we were looking at for the CRB, and not to bring up another issue, but yeah, perhaps I mentioned body cams and social, another Florence. And so again, just think instead of us, if we are spending 98% of our calls dealing with domestic related issues, what's the follow-up? What's happening? We just walk away and wait till the next call, or should we be inserting ourselves, in some kind of way? And Florence can't do it all. So that's a part of, people, infrastructure, social services work, and perhaps reallocating police dollars, not just cutting police dollars, so public safety dollars, but perhaps reallocating them. And just to wrap up, promoting sustainable growth. As I shared last week and in other venues, we had opportunities to grow and allow for business development several years ago, and we weren't very interested in doing it. But now there seems to be the will or the desire or demand for it to happen, and we shouldn't be like as other councils have been accused of, past councils being anti-growth, anti-business, anti-development. We don't want to be those things. So we can't just say we're not. We have to do something to indicate that. With respect to business growth, a lot of times I know we're not the lead on that. It might be somebody like the Chamber of Commerce, but I don't know to what degree we can count on those folks for that kind of thing right now.
Evan, that is 10 minutes.
I didn't think I would use my whole 10 minutes, but I thank you for your time.
Thanks, Kevin. And I think that's a good point to end on. One of the things that's on the draft goals piece right now is being more intentional about our collaboration with the chamber, because I think they're at a point where they need some capacity. And I really appreciated your comment around needing to make some decisions about things. I think that is very relevant to these draft goals. And I want to say, like, as I transition to Laura, that these are draft goals. So, while I think that most of what we're talking about is going to be relevant, no matter what the election outcome is, these are things that normally we finalize early in the year. But I think we'll get a good indication after November 2nd of whether the budgetary implications make sense to move forward with. So with that being said, Laura, you got 10 minutes.
Great. Judy, can I share my screen?
You should be able to. You've got Josue. If not, can you give those sharing privileges?
She has co-host permission, so she should be able to.
Okay,
share.
yep, you got it.
All right. So I actually started from scratch, and I initially thought I wouldn't have that much to add. Then I got on a roll, and I came up with, I have my own categories. They don't mirror what's in the current draft goals, but they touch on, I think, all the same subjects. So the first one is governance, which I think we've all touched on. I'm going to touch on a few things in each of these categories. Interestingly, Judy, you could confirm this. We're supposed to review the charter, I think, every 5 years. And it's probably time. I've thought for a long time, over a decade, that the form of government that may work better here is the executive mayor form, sometimes called the strong mayor form. But that's where the mayor actually runs the executive branch of government. And part of the reason I think that is I think council takes on a tremendously huge workload in this government, because we not only have to do our, traditional legislative work, which includes budget oversight and policy, particularly personnel policy, but we just really take a lot on ourselves. And the very fact that we had a packet that reached 442 pages this year should tell you we're doing too much. So I really think that there's a lot of advantages I won't go into right now of thinking about a executive form of government. So somebody like Josue's position doesn't go away. It just changes to, instead of answering to 5 bosses, he would get to answer to 1, which, believe me, is a lot simpler. So anyway, that's one thing on that. I'm hoping, we kind of touched on this, an idea that might be worth exploring about some personnel sharing, and that would take intergovernmental meetings with township. Budget. As you know, this is not news. I favor bigger reserve, and so I'm I'm going small. I'd like to see us with a 6-month reserve. And I was really happy to see that we're kind of getting closer to that with the reevaluation of revenue that came in from Matt recently. Council, back to governance, but budget council committees. I truly don't see how we function without a finance committee for a lot of reasons. But one of the things finance does is to review supplemental requests. Somebody asked about that at council candidates night even. You know, how do you approve these? And normally they'd come first to finance and then they'd go to the floor of council. These committees, if we had them, they would each start their budgeting with the staff in August to get that kind of list of priorities that would end up flowing into the budget. They would be involved. And Mary Ann has championed participatory budgeting. Now, am not sure what that means exactly, but it sounds like it means something like get more citizens involved. Believe you me, if we had council committees, you will get citizens to come. And the reason is, a lot of times what I've seen is citizens choose their favorite committees, what they enjoy learning about and participating in, and they will come. It'll be a systematic change that will enable more participation. Affordability, I look at it on a global sense. It's not just housing, it's everything. And we can only control what we control. So what can government do to assist with affordability? Utilities, fees, taxes, that's what we do. And so we can focus on how can we control those. I think it should always be in our mind. Yes, there's some revenue enhancing things to do, but I'm not gathering that there's much appetite in the electorate for additional tax levies, but maybe others have a different view. I would also love to find a way, and I know YSDC was formed partly for this, find a way that we can achieve community goals without increasing the overall tax burden. And that would take shifting sometimes things that happen in one jurisdiction that maybe they don't do that this year because the other jurisdiction is going to ask for a levy. Residential development. You know, who are we? Why this government is so into housing development, and I keep asking myself why. Because when I was village manager, I got the message loud and clear that we want to be a village. We want to be a village. What does that mean? That means you stay under 5,000 people. Now, I know we're at 3,400, 3,500, where there's a gap. We have room to grow. But neither do I think do people want it to be an urban kind of environment. I think people want it to be this beautiful environment we have with lots of trees and space for wildlife. And just be aware that density means cutting down stuff, okay? I know you don't like to hear it, but it means cutting down the trees. It means putting way more houses in a small space. So you have less ground, you have less places for stormwater to go. We do not have a stormwater utility. We do not have a built-out stormwater system. So when you do urban density, you need urban amenities like built-out stormwater systems. So I'm going to be kind of more skeptical about densifying the village of Yellow Springs, because I'm not sure that's really where people want to go. I think we already have zoning in place that if somebody wants to do a PUD, they can, and they can get some of that density bonus in that way. Infill, I said at candidates night that I think our biggest challenge and opportunity is infill. We have a lot of infill land. The question is, how does it become available? How do we work together to see something happen? We have buildings that can be rehabbed into housing. I think these are the big challenge. And the great thing about infill, why it's an opportunity, it usually has street access, sewer, water, electrical. These are very expensive infrastructure items to bring into a green space. And one of our number one principles of land use is do not develop green space until you've done your infill. I'm very much in favor of whatever we can do to continue investing in water, sewer, streets, stormwater, electrical. I think we've done so much. I think this government the administration has done a terrific job with it. We've spent down some of our reserves, but you know, you could spend your great-grandchildren's inheritance and still not have all the infrastructure improved to the point you want it. That's the way that is. You know, if you pave all the streets once every 30 years, you're doing pretty good. I've said before, there's certain things legislatively I would like to see done related to infrastructure. Reducing water loss and I&I in the sewer. Now, I think there's some opportunities here to do some matching programs that are would incentivize landowners. And on Mary Ann's point about the climate action sustainability coordinator, I think what Piper's doing is great. I think if there's a coalition of community groups that want to keep funding that effort, that we might be able to provide some match for that through the savings we get as we reduce water loss, we reduce the I&I, and that some of her work could maybe support that and therefore be paid out of those lines, out of those savings. I definitely am in favor of a large solar project, hopefully on industrial legacy land, which is always the first land you look at. You don't want to look at green fields similar as you do with housing. You first look at developing the appropriate sites. And I'm a dark skies fan. I think that is part of the history and inheritance of the people here in Yellow Springs, is living with dark skies where you can see the stars, or more than our Dayton neighbors can. So I'm hoping we can continue to preserve that natural resource.
And that's 10 minutes, Laura.
Okay, so you can see I kind of have a few more things I've written about, but that's in the packet, and I hope people take a look at it. Thank you very much. And I talked long enough that Lisa is now here.
Hi, sorry to be late.
You're still muted, Brian.
Oh no.
I don't know Brian, I'm checking your settings. You do have co-host permission.
Maybe he could leave and come back in. Would that do it?
Are you talking about Brian House? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Brian is muted and he can't get unmuted. Brian House.
Yeah.
He's
For a
trying to
minute,
unmute.
I didn't even see him there as a participant. He blinked out.
Okay. Well, if we follow the process that he had going, which is to give 10 minutes to each council member and to allow for all the council members an opportunity to speak, and then we'll come around to staff. I think that would mean that Lisa, you're next.
Yeah, Lisa, so Brian gave each of us 10 minutes to talk about council goals.
So is everybody else gone already?
Yeah, yes, except for Brian.
All right. I'm a little bit off balance right now because of what I have going on. But so I will be uncharacteristically blurry. I think I've already addressed the goals that I think are important to work on. And so I can just reiterate that and maybe give some time back. I agree that there's a tremendous challenge ahead of us with potential changeover of buildings that are unused right now in the village that I hope we might be able to partner with Antioch College to be more creative. I wish that that could have happened sooner, but hoping that the Development Corporation can help with that. But, you know, it's these, whenever we start talking about land that we don't own, it always requires collaboration and will be a challenge. So maybe that will come up in 2022. I'm not sure it will. You know that I am passionate about keeping to the basics of what's under the street and the streets and the sidewalk and the infrastructure. I think that was neglected for a long time. And I'm glad that that this council is really focused on that. I think we have the right team in place to keep that work going in a strong way. So I don't think we should take our eyes off the basics for a minute. As far as the budget, as I mentioned in the budget meeting, I'm going to encourage us as a council to continue to try to think creatively. We're not the only municipality of any size that's having to sharpen our pencils, and, you know, even households, everyone's trying to do more, at least the same with less. And I think if we just keep doing things the way we've always done them in this time of profound change, that will be a mistake. I am committed, as you know, to some kind of citizen review board. I think that we should bring back a commission, a justice system commission, whatever we're going to call it, and keep moving that that work forward. I believe that the budget that was placed in front of council initially is inflated because it reflects legal fees that already sit in other places in the village budget and have for years and years. So I really hope that we can move forward with that, as well as other work to engage citizens to help us with capacity. You know, like we just came up with this need to have the body camera policy. Just, we can't do all of this. We have to continue to engage citizens who want to be involved. I think that Art and Culture Commission is the poster child right now for seeing what people who want to get involved can get done. And I appreciate that they're not just looking at like fluffy stuff, but really taking on some of the challenges of what does Yellow Springs want to be, and what is the culture of Yellow Springs, and how do we keep that alive and vibrant when there's other forces at work that, you know, pressure for change. To me, that's part of village vitality. I just want to say one more thing about the environmental resiliency. I've been thinking a lot about what can we do, you know, what levers do we really have within the village to have an impact on our environment. And I see a real interconnection with the planning commission and with the repair and maintain infrastructure. You know, just these things like stormwater drainage and the requirements we put on a new building. These are the kinds of things that are they're not very sexy, but I think they're practical and important and can have an impact on the environment in our own backyard. Not that we're not going to try to always reach broader and have a bigger impact. That's what we do here in Yellow Springs. We try to solve the problems of the world. But for me personally, I'm really interested in initiatives and partnerships that can affect, our area. So I really love what's going on with like Agraria and, the land trust and really looking locally and not getting too far ahead of ourselves in terms of reach. Again, I apologize for being not quite as crisp as I hoped that I would be, but I think those are my comments for now.
Okay, and I think I'm back, and I want to backtrack because I have a few comments for both Lisa and Laura. So Lisa, I think actually, one of the things that you hit on that is really relevant to, I guess, as we finalize these goals, which will really happen early next year, is you're so good about thinking about that intersectionality. And I think you talked a lot about that in your comments. And it also reflects a lot of the feedback that people have had around goals. So I think that's really important. But I guess I also want to comment on, I think an area that we can flesh out in our goals. And that's related to, we've gotten a lot of feedback about the vitriol and just kind of the the divisiveness in the community. And I agree with, I think Laura said earlier that the Arts and Culture Commission seems like a logical place to think about some of those issues. And so anyway, so I think that, that kind of just how we look at more positive engagement, which I think seems to be a primary concern and may also relate to developing youth leadership, which we'll probably talk about later. Laura, I wanted to ask you a few questions, before I got cut off. I wanted to make sure I understood that when you talked about densifying, were you highlighting that has like its downsides in terms of like losing like trees and that sort of thing? Did I understand that point correctly?
Yeah, I mean, there are two things.
Yeah.
It can lead to that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it also creates issues about where's the stormwater going, right?
Right.
I mean, those, and I've seen this happen. Yeah, I've seen a couple. It's what we have to accept if we want to put 8, 10, 14 units on a half an acre.
Right. And I just wanted to make sure, like, I totally agree. And I like that you raised that issue because I think as we drill down into like some of the real things we want to do, I think that kind of cost benefit analysis is going to become more and more important. And I think we should operationalize that to some degree. So another question I wanted to ask is, as you know, like there was a committee about the committees and then ultimately it didn't go forward. So I guess I want to understand, since I think, we're being pretty authentic today, like what went wrong and what do we need to do? Because I know a lot of work was put into trying to move that initiative forward.
Yeah, not necessarily wrong, just okay. So this is how I believe democracy works. And our flow chart of our government has at the top who? The people, right? The electorate. They elect us and we are their representatives. And we are supposed to be the ones with the voting power to move legislation forward, for example. So if I'm on a committee with you and you, Brian, and me, and then 10 citizens and staff, and we give everybody a vote on a piece of legislation. Like, we think that stormwater utility legislation should move forward. And if we have a committee like that and we give everybody who's in that room a vote, and the citizens are like, I don't want to pay more fees, I'm not moving that forward. And you and I, the elected officials, get outvoted, guess what? Nothing happens.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a desire to give non-elected people voting power. So I want to point out that these are not commissions. These are council committees to do council's work, not other people's work, okay? So, and we have the responsibility as elected officials to decide for the people what we think needs to move forward, you know?
So that
And
was, so was that
yeah,
the main?
so that was the
sticking
main
point?
thing. That was the main thing.
Okay. Okay.
Was voting power to move something forward to the floor of council.
Okay. Because that, I mean, I wanted that recommendation to come forward, you know, personally. And so I didn't understand like why it didn't. And so, but I'm very interested in it. And so I just wanted to mention that. And the other thing I wanted to highlight is, so we've talked a lot about like, okay, Lisa, go ahead on that point. Yeah, sorry. Oh, you're on mute.
I'd like to also respond to that because I was part of that group. I think we had a really interesting group of people working on that project. I think we put about 4 hours, maybe it was 6. Certainly 4 of actually sitting in meeting times. And I recall that there were 2 issues where we couldn't get to full consensus. One was the voting power, and the other was whether or not we would have a committee dedicated to streets. And I don't remember what we were going to call it. And we were, with one dissenting vote, supportive of moving forward with all of the proposed committees, save that one, saying that just now that team at the village has it together under Josue's oversight, and that committee wasn't needed. And Laura disagreed with that. And so then on the basis of those 2 points where we didn't have consensus, all the work just stopped and it didn't come forward to council. And, you know, I know that I felt like we wasted time, and that it was a shame because we really had a pretty strong consensus in that group, but I would be willing to get back involved with it because I believed in it, but I would want to only get back involved with it if there was an agreement for the participants that there would be a little bit of give and take as part of the spirit of the work.
I have a question, Lisa, real quick. It wasn't just streets, it was a public works committee.
Right, that's what it was called, right? Public
Right,
works.
which is like a huge part of our work of government.
I agree,
Right.
But I really think that everyone except for you, agreed that maybe it would come to pass at some point, but we didn't need it right then, that we would have enough committees to start to form. Maybe we would have one in the future. And for me, it was a classic case of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because as a result, we didn't get any new structure because we didn't also have that one. And I think that that was a loss.
So yeah, so I would like to put this, you know, and I don't know if I did put it on there or not, and we'll pull that, you know, draft sheet up in a minute. But, you know, I wanted that to come forward, and, you know, I was disappointed that we didn't hear that, you know, work or whatever. So anyway, you know, in my mind, like, this is a good proposal. It's in the mix. And, I think there does have to be some like, I don't know if it's compromise or whatever, but I want that to come forward. And Laura, partly why I'm asking questions is because I think you have a lot of great ideas and I want to really make sure I understand them. So on shared government services, so this has been something that we talk about like year on year. Every time that like something comes up, I ask Johnny if he's thinking about this. So my question though is like, do you think that we should like, I don't know if it's codify or like proceduralize, or is there something we should do like similar to our dig once policy and complete streets that would like, I guess, make this more of like part of the, policy and procedure?
I think you simply have to make it a goal of government. I don't know if you can codify it. I think you have to make it a goal to look for opportunities that make sense to share services. So one example, I know jurisdictions share a sewer vacuum truck, like because they're expensive, right? Or there are jurisdictions that have police firefighters. They're dual trained. They're, famously, and I know I'll get open discussion going on this one, but we had an opportunity to save a heck of a lot of money on sharing water services. And people want to complain that we have high utility rates. I think, Josue, correct me if I'm wrong, we're number 1, 2, or 3 on the Oakwood study for the highest utility rates. Now, how did that happen? How did we get there? People need to ask hard questions about that. Anyway, so those opportunities, though, come and go, and they won't be revisited for 2 or 3 generations. So when they come up, I think we just have to look, like you and I will be dead, and somebody who's sitting in our seats might get to talk about meaningful shared water service, for example, right? So I think it can be as small as, like I said, the vac truck, or big, like a water service. But we just need to look for opportunities. I think it's a mentality. I think if you just make it a goal, then it'll happen.
Okay. Yeah, I like putting it in writing somewhere. And maybe it is just a matter of like, we also just kind of put together, we've got a dig once policy, we've got a complete streets policy, we think about shared services, just sort of that like kind of pledge, maybe not so different from our, issues that we highlight for our police department. All right, so that's good. Okay, so like I said, I am going to defer my time because based on everything I heard, I put that into the draft 2022 goals document. So I think what we'll do next is if staff have brief comments about anything, let's try to keep this part to maybe like 15 minutes, but any sort of like, thoughts, like feedback, whatnot. And then I think we're going to like share that document and try to run through some of those draft goals. So, yeah.
Thank you, Brian. And thank you for your opening remarks. I think that our success has come about through this collaborative nature and being in alignment with what it is that we're trying to accomplish for our community. And I think over the last 2 years, we've seen us deliver on that, on solutions for a community. Our infiltration and inflow, it's a clear example. We had exceeded, or we're exceeding our capacity of the system, and we've been able to reduce infiltration and inflow by deploying a variety of strategies. One, understanding the problem and understanding the work that's gone into the past to resolving the problems. And we were successful in reducing costs and identifying those issues and finding cost-effective strategies to reduce infiltration and inflow. second year or this year, we've focused a lot on water loss. So we've been able to reduce our water loss. And once we're done with the remaining leaks in this year, we hope to have reduced our water loss to less than 25%, which, that was the target that we set at the beginning of this year, and we're going to meet that target. And we're also looking at new opportunities to bring in better paying jobs. So these are things that are outside of the basics. So we want to make sure that the power is on all the time as it's expected to be, that water, we're providing clean water to all of our residents. So we're filling the basics, but our administration goes beyond that and just taking care of the basics. But we're looking at ways of improving the economic sustainability of the village. The team got together today and we were calculating the economic impact of our most recent work, the Cresco expansion, the WYSO radio, the eatery, the comedy club. Just in those projects, we identify over 60 million in anticipated economic development, even local investment in our community. Then we got the Ober development project that we've been working on for a year. I hope that you've had an opportunity to see the work session between Planning Commission and the Ober development. It's a great product mix. There's a little bit for everyone there for all the different segments of our community that you've talked about, moderate income, different types of housing. So good projects that are going on there. And these things don't happen overnight. They take a lot of work. They take the patience and an alignment to deliver on these values. So we've been able to accomplish those things. We're moving with broadband. Kevin, you're right. Broadband is key infrastructure. It's key infrastructure, not just how people live, play, but also work. Now it's key element to access the markets. And we've been able to, the labor market and being able to sell products. We've been able to move this project along with little money from our own treasury. We've been able to secure funding. We're able to use CARES money and secure that $300,000 grant from the state. So we'll be able to roll that out in the coming months to up to 300 homes, which will represent about 17% of our residents. And obviously there's a lot of more work to do in that space, but it's going to be a game changer for our community. I heard Laura at the candidates night, and she presented this broadband concept as a challenge and an opportunity. And yes, it brings a little bit of both. That I think the concern was around affordability, that broadband can increase pricing for homes and it might make the community more attractive and price people out. I think the broadband has an opportunity to also improve affordability. One, by giving our residents better access to the labor market, so improving their earning potential. But it also can reduce costs from their end. You look at how we're pricing our broadband efforts, they're going to come at lower rate than what's available on the market. So I think it can translate to savings to our residents with better speeds, higher speeds. So I'm excited to hear a lot of the things that you are all thinking about. Many of them do keep me up, such as how to continue to deliver the quality of services that we've been known for now, and do it in a way that is financially sound. We've had some budget challenges, primarily due to COVID, and it shows how vulnerable we are to such economic depressions. We had significant income losses, and I'm happy to see that the models that Matt ran last week, it shows us in a better position, and we think that position is going to get better, and there's a lot of work ahead of us. So I'm glad you're sharing that pain with me, that we have to find ways of continuing to deliver great services while keeping our cost structure affordable. There are a few things in the comments tonight that do worry me, and I'll speak from a position just being open, as I think that many of you have been. I am concerned about this concern that there's a breakdown in collaboration with staff, and the idea that maybe council members joining staff meetings. I'm not sure where that's coming from. We try to approach our work and our mandates from council as best as we can and get them done as cost effectively as we can. And there's some things that we're expected to do that we cannot do. There's a structure to our form of government. And I tried building a collaborative shared governance structure with council so that we can be successful in achieving our goals. I think our goals are the goals of the community. Our work, my administration's work, is to deliver value for our residents, for all of our residents. And I think at times, I think all of our goals are both administration and council's goals are aligned to deliver the best value for our residents. But I think at times we're a disconnect of what's more important and what's going to be the most cost-effective way of delivering services. So I think that there's clearly room for work to be done in that area, because I think the committee works are also maybe coming from that sentiment that council wants to be more involved in the day-to-day activities and directing the day-to-day activities and directing staff. And we're not set up in that form of government.
If I could just speak to that, I certainly don't intend that at all. As a matter of fact, what I suggested earlier about having an executive mayor form of government would get council further away from staff. We wouldn't be involved at hardly at all, except for the three things: legislation, budgeting, and some overarching policy matters.
Lisa, did you want to say something? Okay. Yeah, but yeah, in the spirit of authenticity, I appreciate that you are flagging that, Josue, because I think, yeah, there is some discussion apparently to be had there, that has, been highlighted. And so the way I've captured it on the draft goals is that we should solidify the processes for communications. And I don't know exactly what that means, but I think some clarity around that would be good. So. So Josue, did you have anything else?
No, I think on the goals, I think a lot of it is the next step is flushing some of these out. On the housing front, I think obviously there's a high demand for improving the supply of housing and improving the condition of housing. We've taken an approach with this Ober development project of ensuring that the housing needs assessment and a few other things that we know are clear desires and needs of our community are being addressed. We are open to meeting with any potential developer, and I think Marianne, you'd be surprised to know that there are people moving in the space and developing the space to become developers here in the village. And I think they're starting out, and I think there's some successes on the horizon. So infill development is an opportunity. There's also concerns about a lot of vacant property coming available. I think Lisa touched a bit on this, and I think that we're doing some good groundwork on being prepared to deal with infill development opportunities, and we see them as opportunities because it's clear that that there isn't enough supply in our community. And that's what's driving the price, the bidding wars, and causing folks to lose out on opportunities, housing opportunities, or being outbid and housing that become available. But it's not just home ownership, it's also rental opportunities. I think at the candidates night, several of the candidates touched on this quality of housing. I think there are concerns there. And yeah, the partnership with Home Inc., where we leverage our contribution to their project that help leverage additional funding, can help improve those housing assets. So there's space in housing infill development. I know Denise has been very proactive about looking at opportunities for ADUs and other infill opportunities, and we've seen a lot of that come before Planning Commission. From an infrastructure perspective for housing, you are all right that there are some infrastructure challenges dealing with stormwater, but we've got policies in place that can help address how to deal with that additional stormwater displacement. So I think that there's that we can't let the lack of infrastructure or the conditions be the barrier to stopping some of these opportunities for them. I think we're going to have to address some of the infrastructure challenges as we're taking on opportunities. So, particularly with our sewer system, our storm and sanitary sewer systems, the work that we've done over the last 2 years to reline our sewer systems, we focused on key areas where the defects or the conditions of that infrastructure is so deteriorated that if we don't act now, we would have to break up ground and to fix those. So we're trying to remediate things before they get worse, and also address issues that are key to the infrastructure, to further housing development or economic development. Yeah, so for Brian, the next, all these goals, I think, would just require fleshing them out and finding where they create synergy with the other goals and have an opportunity to enhance other goals.
Yep. Yeah, and I agree. We need to, ultimately sync the goals as we kind of began with. So other staff members that want to weigh in on, things that are related to them. Denise, anything you want to highlight? Oh, do we need to unmute you? All right.
You're still muted, Denise.
Looks like we're having mic issues. Well, Brian, we'll wait for Denise to come on board. One of the things that I've changed about this goal planning session, it used to be that the village manager would meet with council and they'll hash out the goals. I bring the team to these meetings because you hear it directly from the teams. You hear about what's happening on the ground, and so that's something that you and I changed as we started to look for opportunities to synchronize our goals. Right. I think that's been that's yielded results.
Yep, I agree. All right, let's see. Johnny's like tech person in here, huh?
Wear multiple hats around here.
May I say something to correct?
Yes, go ahead, Marion.
Yeah. So when I brought up the issue of staff council relationship and threw out a couple of suggestions, including council members coming to staff meetings, it was not at all for council to direct staff. It was totally the opposite. I'm concerned that there's communication from staff that doesn't get to council. And I'll give you an example of how of a situation that now exists, I think, because we don't have that kind of council staff relationship. With the Environmental Commission, when we worked with the Tecumseh Land Trust to get the conservation easement on, and do the flow device and the prairie and the wetlands. That was driven by the Environmental Commission and volunteers. Staff was barely involved. And now we have a situation where, had staff been involved, I think we could have created a management plan that, well, we don't much have a management plan. But so I'm talking about ways that council or a commission can get out in front of something and we don't get staff involvement to support that. And that is my concern, not council trying to direct staff. So I just wanted to say that.
Thanks for
Thank
that,
you,
Mary.
Mary, and I appreciate that, and I'm sorry that I made made a wrong interpretation about that. I appreciate you clarifying that. I think on that point, you're right. I think that some of our collaborative relationship has deteriorated. I pulled out of the Environmental Commission meetings. Those are something I was attending for a little over 2 years, and given where things were going, it was absorbing a lot of time and energy from me with all the other commitments. And so I withdrew from those meetings. And I think that there's some of that disconnect or that being in sync or knowing the work better gets lost. Kevin and the Library Commission speak very highly about the outcomes we have accomplished in the Library Commission. And part of that difference was me attending those meetings and being deeply involved in the work and understanding all the needs there and having the direct line of communication with now that's Tracy, Pierce County, to be able to address everything as they came up in real time. So I'm hopeful that as the election passes, that we can, maybe the rhetoric or something will change and we can get back to creating better alignment with communication and commitment towards seeing each other's success.
Okay, so I see Denise, you're on mic now. So yeah, feel free
I don't know
to-
what happened. I completely lost the screen. I couldn't find the mute button. I couldn't do anything. But
Yeah.
just a couple of comments on relating to some of the things that Marianne said and Kevin said. The zoning code update in 2013 was really a complete turnaround of what we had from the 70s, even earlier than that, when there was fear that we were going to swell to a population of 10,000 or more due to some sort of bypass, US 68 bypass that was possibly coming our way. And so, it wasn't until 2013 that was completely revamped. I mean, they'd had replacements, sections that were fixed over the years, but the 2003 update was just a complete overhaul. And I feel like, it's a work in progress. Like I said, as I've come on here, there've been more things that needed to be done. The pocket neighborhood development was really created as another tool for infill development. We, along this council, the previous council that many of you were on, helped with the uncommon lots and the Environmental Commission came through with the changes to the weeds ordinance to help with manage natural landscapes. And then Planning Commission did a whole lot of work to create some changes within the subdivision regulations for managing stormwater, in which, council approved that as well. So in those things, over time, we've tried to fix some of those issues. And as Josue said, we have these policies now in place for managing stormwater, making that more the responsibility of the homeowner to manage as much stormwater as they can before they release it into our system. And then as far as the anti-business sense, I'm not seeing that like it used to be. It was out there before that there was this, that we had a very anti-business attitude. But I think part of that might have been our relationships in the past. And now that we have our own building department here, that's hopefully going to help with that economic development, economic growth. because I think maybe we were getting lumped in, even though from the zoning end of it, we weren't holding things up. So hopefully that's going to be helpful. These are just random thoughts I'm having as I went through this, and I wrote some things down. I know Laura mentioned the charter form of government, possibly changing that. My only thought on that is that, it's a sacred cow. I don't know if you guys want to go down that road with the community. Maybe they'd be okay about it, but I know that, there's still people alive that do remember back from the 50s when that was changed and to a charter form of government. Might talk to the community first before maybe going full force on that change. Obviously, it has to go before the voters anyway. And then I always felt like maybe we didn't do a very good job on educating the community about why we have the water costs are more expensive. I know what Laura mentioned that, on the Oakwood, we're in the first, second, or third at the top. We used to be almost at the bottom. But again, as Laura mentioned, we did build a water plant and somebody has to pay for it. And people have to maybe understand that they wanted to be independent and have their own water plant, control their own destiny. It costs. Let's see. And I do want to also say I'm really sorry about Andrew Klein leaving. He was our only local. We do have a couple other local builders, so I'm not going to say he was the only one. But again, that was something that was not under our control because that really came down to the cost of the land. And I want to tell you now that when, Ober first called me on the phone, the minute they called me, I started talking to them about the possibility of annexation. And I gave them all the benefits to being annexed because the way that property was, we were going to have to provide water and sewer regardless of if they came into the village or not. So it then became a thing of, do we want to have control? And the team here, Johnny and Josue all agreed that annexation was the only way that we could have some control. And Ober was very open to that and worked with us through that because, they could have just gone ahead and followed the township zoning, a 10,000 square foot lots, and built their single family detached dwellings on it. And, now we have an opportunity to do something a little bit different, which is what we did and why it took a year and why Ober worked with us on that. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. And that we do work with local builders, and we're very hopeful that our relationship with NIC is going to help them educate themselves about what it is they need to do. It's not going to be a thing where you got to do this and then wait another 30 days and then you got to do this again. Hopefully this NIC will help them understand what they need to do to fix it and be more of an educational opportunity. And I want to close with the Environmental Commission, because one of the things that I thought the Environmental Commission was going to do after we went through the weeds ordinance and made all those changes with managed natural landscapes, that there was going to be some sort of education, maybe through the Environmental Commission, to let people understand that. And I haven't heard that that's on their list of things to do, but it would be good for them to maybe educate the community about what our code now allows as far as managed natural landscaping.
Right. Thanks for that, Denise. Yeah, I think, zoning's going to be pretty busy. And given like what I've seen from some of the feedback, I do want to highlight related to water that, 8 years ago, we ran on like rehabbing the plant and the price tag was 2.5 million. And we learned that projection was way off. I expect that the getting water from Springfield was way off, not to mention that I've heard that it was a no-go from the get-go, or at least, after conversations from at least somebody like that was in those meetings. Laura, I'm seeing a hand up.
I just want to correct one thing, Denise. I didn't say get rid of the charter. You can have an executive form of government as a charter.
Yeah, I didn't mean to
Yeah,
get rid of the charter. I
yeah.
meant just changing the
No.
charter.
The
Isn't-
the council manager form of government has its pluses and minuses, as does
Yeah.
the other form.
It would
Anyway,
be an education
but-
to the community because,
yeah.
it is a sacred cow. So,
And Brian, on water, just so you know, the Ohio EPA supports, and it still supports, I think, shared services because you need a pretty big service area to make the costs go down for folks. So
Right.
they were offering matching grants to do shared service that weren't available if we build our own.
Mm.
And the numbers were 1.8 million and 3.2 at that time, and then we didn't act, and the costs went up. So that's how that happened.
Right.
Right.
Right. Thanks.
Mhm.
Okay. Chief Carlson, you want to say anything?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hooray. Good evening, everyone. Thank you. It's been a while since I've talked to you. So a couple points here that I figure in many ways I have nothing to lose by saying, but I want to answer to Mary Ann. You talked about developers and builders locally, and I used to be one. And I have to say that at that time, it was very difficult for me to obtain work through Yellow Springs in any government capacity. I know I did end up working on the council chamber's desk, which I really appreciated, but I just wonder in the spirit of transparency, which is to see through from both directions, when the wellness center was rebuilt, how many local tradespeople were used in that project? Was it a local architect? Was it, I mean, these kind of things to me are important, that things that we should think about in our words in promoting what we want to do in Yellow Springs. We talk a lot about affordability, but we are booming economically, and the village and population is growing with the new comedy club, the new 7 establishment eatery. We're only going to be bringing more folks into Yellow Springs. So it's just something to consider with regards to public safety. We talk a lot about our social services network, and Florence is doing an amazing job. There are a lot of ideas that I think she and the department can bring to the table. I know one of them, we round table here at the PD, and we talk about one of the ideas was, why doesn't the village buy the motel at the end of town? It's a perfect spot for a day shelter. There could be a couple rooms for emergency stay that the police department and fire department could work with. And if you do take that idea up, please contact me because I would love to be part of that project. Regarding things like the review board, I am completely in favor of civilian oversight. It's actually the way our federal government military works and any paramilitary. But I do want to make the point and say it publicly that the proposal is asking for more funds for a citizens review board than we pay Florence. And something to consider and think about. On the flip side, I'm completely elated that I've had the opportunity here to serve with everyone. I've offered my services to Josue till November 12th. And if I can be of any assistance in the process to move it along as well, I offer that. I know that Josue's told me you have some good candidates. And feel free to contact me anytime. I'd love to talk with you guys about the future. Shannon and I have plans one day to sell our property, and we want to move to town, be close to her family. They've been here 31 years, and we absolutely love it here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Johnny Burns.
I don't know how much I'm going to speak because I'm a little bit overwhelmed with the way that the meeting started. I felt it was more of a staff has already got our plates full and we didn't do enough to move forward, which is very irritating to me personally. I've been here 8 years. To hear that council members are trying to get review committees to try to take the lead on different projects that we got going on, or to tell us what's the most important we're the professionals and we've got license and we have more insight than a lot of the citizens have. So I'm trying to figure out, we're doing a great job moving forward and budgeting. So I'm trying to figure out why we need more people in a process that we've already got going, moving in the right direction. The Andrew Klein situation, I wish it would have went more like the overdevelopment situation did. We learned. The price wasn't the only sticking point, but we wasn't at liberty to do anything else. He could have worked with it. Affordability was another factor in there because he had a certain percentage that the village mandated that he puts in there and they wanted that to be first. So Andrew did make several attempts to try to help out the village, but fell short. And I believe if we would have made that deal with Andrew, or Andrew would have made that deal, he'd still be in town, still working, still doing what we need to do moving forward. He had a great product as a house. It may not be affordable on the front end, but it was affordable with utilities. He built a well house, insulated, best glass, floor heating. He thought outside the box. He thought more like the Yellow Springs people in town do. Kevin, on the Miller Valentine situation, I want you to take in consideration when they built the Antioch McGregor, they did not pay their $24,000 electric bill. And so then we had to write it off of the village utilities. That was in 2007. It got wrote off in 2015 after they refused to pay multiple times. If you want to talk about putting houses in the backyard, I invite all of you to go to 210 West South College and tell me what a nightmare it is for the infrastructure in that area. You got two houses on top of each other. You got sewer in the backyard, which is literally 5 feet away from the property line. You got an electric line now that runs over top of a house. You actually have a water line that runs up the middle of somebody's property. I don't think that's the answer. I think repurposing the, yes, it's West Center College, ain't it? Sorry, 210 West Center College. I don't think that's the answer if the lot is so small that you can't really do it. If you go over there, they're actually putting a fence up, and literally if they walk out of their house and walk off their points or off their porch, they will actually run into the neighbor's fence within a foot. Shared services, we did not do that when I come to the village, but I can tell you that we actually do that now more than the village has ever done. Matter of fact, Fairborn just cambered the storm system on Friday. Greene County cambered 2 sewers last week. And the city of Xenia, we have helped them with our vac truck. When theirs broke down, we had ours on standby for them during rainfalls. So when you talk about shared services, we go above and beyond, and people actually call us to help them, Piqua and other places. And I think this is something that you guys don't understand that we're doing all the time. And to put it into a document form may be good, but it's not going to change anything. It'd just be a box that we can check off saying that we already do it. Kind of like the dig once policy. It's already something that we do now, but it's a box that's checked off. As far as the high water cost, I don't want to get into a whole bunch of it, but I've sat in the meetings with Patty Bates and the city of Springfield, Laura. The numbers that was given to them for the amount of water that we ran through the plant a day was 1 million gallons. That was not accurate. We didn't have a water meter on the plant until 2018. When we told them what our average water consumption was a day, they was no longer interested in the village participating or them even being in part of bringing water down to us. So I actually sit in a meeting with them and the manager And also the other thing that the citizens said then is they didn't want the water coming from Springfield because A, they do soften it, and B, they do put fluoride in it. And that was during public meetings as well. So I'm going to keep all my goals and everything going forward that we have going. Just remember that we are all busting our ass, not just for you, but for who Laura says, who we work for as the villagers. And I think the villagers will understand that we have went above and beyond. Since I've been here, we have been above and beyond probably before I even got here. But I would just challenge you guys to go back and listen to the first comments that were made, and you'll see instantly I was offended with the comments that was being made because I felt like it was aimed at staff didn't do enough. So that's all I got to say.
All right, thanks, Johnny. I think that's some great feedback. Again, I appreciate you highlighting the shared services because we've talked about that often. And I think otherwise, my interpretation, even though they weren't my comments on, review, is that we want to better understand how to put policies in place that support the team. At least that's where I'm coming from. So Marianne, yes, I see both your virtual and physical hand. So
Yeah. So, I don't know what Johnny is referring to. I did just leave a message in the chat for him because it wasn't clear by what he said. But I want to affirm that there was nothing that I said in any way was meant to infer that staff wasn't doing enough. In fact, I feel the opposite, and which is why I think it's important to have communication direct from senior staff members, in particular, to council members, and especially on regarding projects and commissions, so that we can be on the same page and not sort of go running off on something that then find out from staff has implications that we didn't understand. So I think one thing that makes it difficult now is being on Zoom, not being in a room where we can actually be seeing with each other, which actually I wish we had done, makes it more difficult. But I think there's so many communication challenges, and this meeting is bringing up some of them. It's difficult to say something and then not have it be interpreted correctly and not being able to have a back and forth conversation about it.
Okay, thanks, Marianne. I mean, although I think this is probably one of the most authentic conversations we've ever had, even though it is on Zoom. Judy, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just would support Johnny's interpretation. That was exactly the impression that I got. And then the impression I'm now left with is that it is a problem of Josue's, that you're not trusting him to adequately communicate between council and staff, or that he's not adequately communicating between staff and council. So I think that needs to be clarified, because that's what I heard, and now I hear it sort of shifting to, well, we're fine with staff, but the problem is the communication between council and staff and council, and we'd like to eliminate the manager. So let me know if I'm wrong, because that's what I just heard.
Yeah, you're wrong, Judy. You're wrong. I think that it is unrealistic to anticipate that we can have a group of people who are the people making decisions and have everything flow down through one person to the people who carry out the work, so to speak. There are too many moving parts to anticipate that the village manager is going to have his or her hand on every single thing that happens in village government. And so the example that I gave regarding the Environmental Commission and the work that was done on the glass farm and still being done, and had Johnny been involved in the beginning, well, Johnny wasn't here, but there could have been communication back and forth. that didn't happen. And so I'm not implying that the village manager, I'm implying that it's too much of a demand to put on one person to have flowing back and forth. And I know that council says things that get down to staff, that, you know, council, staff can watch council meetings. Council can't, council isn't getting reactions from staff. And I don't know that, I suspect that that Josue in this case, or the village manager, does not necessarily communicate everything that comes down from staff for whatever reason. And sometimes that's appropriate. And sometimes I think it probably would be helpful. To me, it would be helpful.
Yeah, I think the other
And also, I'll say one more thing to you, Judy, directly. You have a particular role in terms of council. And I would really appreciate when you know that a staff person has been offended by something that I say. It's very easy for that to happen. We're in this position where we talk, that I would like to know that. And if you don't tell me that, and if Josue doesn't tell me that, then I don't know it. And then I find out about it through roundabout channels. And, you know, if I don't know that I've offended someone, I can't do anything about it. So I would really appreciate it if you, Judy, when you're aware that I've said something or that something's happened that I could do something about, that you let me know.
And I think that does underscore at least what's on the draft goals is refining communication processes, which clearly this discussion highlights. But I don't think, I understand it's easy to lump everyone together. But ultimately, I think getting back to Lisa's original point, we're just kind of discussing things. And, you know, some of those ideas may not be the ones that like would fly with the majority, but they're important discussions to have. So I see Brianne has her hand up. Brianne,
and I apologize for my cat voicing her opinion too, just a couple seconds ago, but I would encourage every council member, because you've had discussions on the charter issue and how would a restructuring look like, there is a specific section in the charter that relates to council's ability to communicate with staff. I mean, it says all, except for purposes of official inquiry in section 83, everything goes through the village manager. So if council wants to revise that, there is no set process for charter review. We don't have to do it every 5 years or every 10 years. If council thinks, you know what, as a majority body, we would like to streamline or change some of these processes, specifically with respect to personnel, look at the sections, you know, 80, 81, 82, 83, because that's where your charter amendments and your personnel policies are all governed under the charter. And if you want to look at, well, what would make the village work better, as a body, you have the power to initiate amendments without a charter review committee.
Right. Thanks, Brianne. Judy, you had your hand up again?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say that with regard to the Environmental Commission comment, there's another step in the process, which is that council has a responsibility to serve as liaison between their board and commission and then the village manager. So that's another route of communication that is often problematic. And we've looked at that many, many times over the years in goals, in discussions. It's problematic, not because it's anyone's fault. It's just one of those aspects of being a council member, and that responsibility can sometimes be difficult, particularly if you don't have a member of the management team sitting in your board or commission meetings. But I would just put out there that that's another piece of the puzzle that that doesn't necessarily, that the blame does not lie necessarily with the manager or with staff or, or with the commission. It's about the communication process. And do we want to look at that differently? Because sometimes it is problematic.
And I would add to that list, or with counsel. I mean, we're all kind of navigating like a somewhat weird sort of scenario where, again, like if somebody's not happy with the village manager, then council hasn't supervised well. If somebody's not happy with, we're all in that mix. And so I think that's why it's this is a legitimate topic, and I don't think it should be considered as a personal slight to anyone. All right, Matt Dillon. I don't want to dig into budget necessarily, but curious to hear like what sort of things like raise your hackles from some of this discussion.
Sure. Just a few takeaways. I think the discussion about shared service arrangements, I think it's certainly viable, a healthy discussion. Anytime we have an interest in furthering those, I mean, what we're really discussing is capitalizing on economies of scale, synergies through these relationships. So I think those are really great things to explore. Very open to looking at those where those are appropriate and where there's an appetite from council to coordinate with other municipalities, and where I think we could benefit as opposed to be somewhat dragged down by the bureaucracy of multiple municipality coordination. So I want to say, like, I'm very open to that. I think it's a great mutual goal of everyone to look at these opportunities, whether they're things we're thinking about now or just things that could come up in the future. There's a lot of synergies being made, and even more so innovation that could be made if we start having that mindset. So that was my first takeaway. We've been talking about a lot about the finance committee, and I'm curious. I think there's a lot of discussions, if there's a genuine interest in something like this, what the structure would be, the amount of time that would be required for some of that, just really how those would come apart. I'm interested from me hearing like what are going to be my new responsibilities with that. And so I'd be curious. I'm certainly open and willing to do that. I hope it doesn't part of the natural process of it is me thinking, what aren't you guys getting now that you want to start getting, through the idea of a committee. So, I'm not going to take that personal, but I'm going to think about like what I could give to you now that you're not getting that would partially satisfy your need for a committee. I think that the idea of a group of people working together on these issues is something I'm open to. I think it's great to have a sounding board. I also want to caveat that with you hire many of us in this position because of professional expertise. So, through the coordinating on some of that, I just, want to just limit that the administration's there to, to support some of the rational decision making as opposed to being so, I guess, responsive to public input at a rate which doesn't involve us being able to sit and think through it at the time. So I'm very open to what that might look like. Just want to let you know, but I did interpret that maybe there's something I'm not doing that you guys need to see. So I'm looking forward to what that might entail when we flesh that out, what that body might look like. And then the third topic, we haven't talked about a ton about it, citizen participation in the budget. And I think the questions came up a couple of times on what does that mean? And the answer is it can mean different things for everybody. The bottom line is that it means some level of participation from the community, whether that's just discussing the trade-offs that we make as part of our budget process or involving them in decision-making, even on a limited basis, what would go into that. So I think when we talk about it, we should just take some time and think about what makes most sense for us as far as getting a strategic involvement, putting the forethought into the planning on what feedback we might get versus what feedback we might know, through our budget process being mostly a continuation budget. A lot of the money's obligated going into these processes. So just educating the stakeholders about the trade-offs that we're already facing and communicating our existing challenges, I think would go a long way. So very open to having more involvement with our citizens and communicating our existing process as it is. So I think just doing that would go a long way, and just having them know about what we're doing already. So just
right. Yeah, good feedback, Matt. So I'm going to say a few things and kind of frame up some stuff. I know that Kevin and I think Laura want to make a few comments, and I do want to end on time. So I think, Matt, you highlighted some things that I think are very important to this process, which is that I understand that as we start to discuss these things, it may, feel that a little bit uncomfortable, but I think to me, what it signals is interest from all council members in a lot of the work that you guys have done and have wanted to present to us in the past, like in detail. And we haven't always allowed time for that. So I hope there's some appreciation for the fact that, we are allowing time to better understand like what we need to know. Two, I think to Matt's point, elevate how to better inform the community, make the case. I had a lot of conversations today about that, how we really like make the case for the services that we provide and why those make sense. So, in my mind, and I feel like this is generally the case for council, this is not coming from a place of like, we've got a clean house and like everything, whatever, but it's more just, we're coming out of a pandemic. We, have been alerted that there are budgetary issues. We're trying to be on top of that. And I think we want to work with everybody. So, people are getting negative signals. They shouldn't be coming from me or most of council. I do want to share this document just because I want to highlight, and I guess I need to pull it up again, what I want us to be thinking about for the future. And so that is related to, all right, if I can figure this out. I think it is really important that we start to turn our attention on, in looking at this, what is doable and how this is all going to make sense. So one of the things I liked about the feedback from Marianne and Laura is they started to turn some of these initiatives into what probably needs to happen for any of them to move forward, which is creating some kind of one-pager about what it means, what's the content. Marianne, like you made the comment, like, what does working with Glen Helen about accessibility mean? Well, this means like delivering on that grant for clearing out the old power plant and also working on the Yellow Springs Clifton connector. But I think as folks start to think about what goals matter to them, each of these need to be fleshed out. And I think, Marianne and Laura like made an attempt at starting to do that, because ultimately that's how we're going to decide like what's possible and how we're going to work together on this. But, again, I want to be really clear, and I'm going to stop sharing that this is definitely not about like, the village team has goals that they're going off on, and council's got these other like sort of like, pie in the sky kind of things that are going on. I think we're all on the same page that we want to like make the work manageable. We want to work together, and we need to coordinate that activity. But I'm very committed to the fact that these need to be village goals. So I'm going to stop there, but I just wanted to kind of frame up like where we're going next. And the bottom line is, we also know that these draft goals, I guess, could change if there's some like, big shift in council, but that, while I don't expect that to happen, if that does happen, that's why these are still in draft form. But everybody's ideas about everything do not go into the goals. And so unless, for example, there's a big shift, I don't imagine we're going to look at a strong mayor form of government, for example. So, I think everybody's got to kind of manage their expectations about what the political will is really going to be. But I understand that we're in times where it's easy to be tense and, get carried away. But I don't want that to be the overall tenor of what I got from this meeting. And I did really appreciate the authentic feedback. So Kevin, Laura, anybody, we've got about 8 minutes for any last comments.
Okay. Well, thank you, Brian. I'll be quick, I believe. Yeah, and I think this has been a valuable
meeting. It went faster than I anticipated. But Matt said something that really that really resonated with me. It's a positive, by the way, so relax. But the question is asked: what problem are we trying to solve? A proposal could be made, and then Matt was probably, I presume Matt was in an awkward position that, okay, if this is a proposal being put forward, that would solve this problem. So what do I need to do to remedy this problem? And all I'm saying is that we need to be careful about what problem we're trying to solve. It doesn't necessarily take an overarching, cultural shift to resolve some of these issues. But I think if we just take on an attitude of continuous improvement, just using Matt, if you don't mind, as an example. Well, I shared 8 pages of data. That's darn it. Well, next time I'll share 10 to give them that last little bit of data so that there's fewer questions being asked. So again, if we take on that attitude of continuous improvement, we can find things to make things better without doing major shifts. I think better informing citizens of all of what we do, as was highlighted during the candidates forum last week, informing citizens is a role that we play. And throughout this conversation today, in various parts of the discussion, better information, better communication has come up. So in that continuous improvement frame of mind, let's focus on communication. I mean, the police, for example, they do so many good things, but unless you're talking to chief or one of the officers on a regular basis, you just don't know. So there's a lot of good stuff that happens that I don't think we share enough about, and the rationale for some of the things we do can certainly be shared more. And Brian, to a point that you raised, currently in the United States, the council manager form of government is the most popular form of government. And this is not just a discussion. This is a data point that I was able to find. So I think we're in a good place now. Things like charter amendments, I think every effort to change a charter ought to get 3 or 4 cycles. In other words, good idea, but we're not going to do it. Good idea, but we're not going to do it. And then eventually, maybe it makes sense. I think the idea is everything started off with a certain structure, and every change to a charter is not just a flight of fancy. It's an effort to make things better. So that's all I said. I could say a lot more, but I won't. Thank you very much.
All right. Any other last comments?
Yeah, I have a couple comments. So staff should not in any way interpret the idea of council committees as being a comment on their inability to do their jobs or lack of professionalism or any such thing. I encourage staff and Josue, when you go to your professional meetings with your colleagues, talk to your colleagues who work in jurisdictions that have council committees. They're quite common. We're unusual that we don't have them. And what council committees do is they do the work of council. They don't do your work. They do the work of council. So what does that mean? For example, if we want to do stormwater fee legislation, it's legislation. And so we need to talk directly with Johnny, with Josue, the council people. I'm in favor of council people taking accountability and responsibility for legislation they bring forward, that whoever is going to be working on that, work on that with staff. And that's what happens in the council committee, is council is doing its job, not your job. So I encourage you to please look at our surrounding jurisdictions that have these committees, attend some meetings, please, and you'll see how they work. I think that I had another thought, but it's escaped me. But I like your idea, Brian, of, yeah, I think some of these things definitely need some flesh on them. And my 5 pages of goals, I understand completely that most of them aren't going to make it in. These are things that I think are important. Some of them maybe don't rise to the level of goals. They can just be things we work on. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Laura. All right, any other final comments before we wrap it up? Josue?
Brian, I appreciate you guiding this discussion. I think it was very very refreshing, because I think we're getting a lot of things on the table and working through those challenges. And we're going to be doing a lot of more of these conversations to really get back in alignment and creating that synergy. Some of these topics that come up, like the finance committee or this committee work, we have great relationships with our local government. I have lunch monthly with the managers in the area. That's Fairborn, Beaver Creek, Xenia. We're having those meetings. Johnny has his meetings with superintendents and public works director. We know the work that's happening in the space. We do our due diligence to stay up to date with the latest technology and the latest best practices. So we're doing our work. So Laura, respectfully, I disagree, because we are talking with our colleagues. One of the challenges we have, we want to be as effective as we can at council, and I think council wants to accomplish a lot, and rightly so. This is a group of high achievers, and you want to accomplish a lot of things. You want to solve the world, and we don't want to get left behind because we're so focused on some of the basics. So a lot more to say, but I think, thank you, Brian, for facilitating this conversation. I think it's helped us recenter, refocus, and I'm very optimistic now, because I think that there's some things that we'll work through and make sure that the 2022 goals are synergized, or there's some synergy between you accomplishing your vision for the community and us being able to deliver on the operations and the administration goal to ensure that we are providing the best services that we can to our citizens.
All right, I think that's a great comment to end on, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.